The most important thing is that we are taking care to protect the environment and public health through our operations and greening our operations, but also it's important to let the public know that New York's agencies care about sustainability and that we're taking action to reduce our own impacts, and that's one way to document that and show it. It's also important to let the governor know and your leader of your agency or authority, your commissioner, president, or chairs, know about your hard work. And everything that you submit to us every year, I want to emphasize, is compiled in our annual report. And it's all available at the link that I have on the slide here. A lot of times I just use Google and say OGS, Green New York, and that brings me right to it. So I definitely encourage you to look at that. We are very much encouraging everyone to send us pictures because a picture tells 1,000 words, and that's a wonderful thing. Slide. Got it. Okay. Now focusing on what reporting does for your agency more particularly. One, it highlights your staff and their successes. So I didn't have the technical capability to say your picture here on top of this image, but that's what I was thinking. This is a picture of DUC's Region 9 sustainability team. They love this shot. I mean, I think it helps build morale to really let people know what your staff are doing and that you're recognizing their work. And we have 9 regions across the state, and it really helps to get that information out there about what all these folks are doing. Also really important to share our successful strategies with each other. Other agencies can model after what you're doing and learn from your success, especially the way you achieve your success. And then finally, we get to identify where we need to improve. So measuring, for example, the amount of waste we generate and the amount of waste we recycle, we can see where we might need to improve. What do we need to improve in terms of recycling? Do we need to add a composting program? And the goal is continuous, steady improvement, and that's what reporting gets you, because you're looking at your metrics, you're checking against goals, you can set a lot of your own goals in certain areas. And the great news is we report as a team, we talk to each other as a team, we're all in this together, and I look forward to seeing all of you at the Green New York Forum in October. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Beth. And next up, we have Shireen Brock, the chair of the reporting subcommittee.
Hi, everyone. So I'm just going to go down a little basic guidance for the reporting form. Obviously, all agencies are a little different. Some are a lot smaller, so they might not necessarily need to use that EO4 spreadsheet that I send around. But this is, just basic guidance. So the first thing is to refer to the guidance document that you should have received in an email before starting the EO4 reporting process. It answers many of the frequently asked questions that we receive. Completed SurveyMonkey reporting forms are due this year on October 19th. Most, if not all, of the questions in the reporting form do require an answer from the majority of reporting agencies. Even if your agency contracts out the work, you are still responsible for asking the contractor and getting an answer to the question. Our goal is for agencies to strive for sustainability improvements annually and for sustainability coordinators to share sustainability improvements and barriers to improvements with staff at their agencies and with our team here. So the Excel form that you should have received. Use the EO4 Excel reporting form to collect data from regions, facilities, sub-offices, and any other buildings that you might be responsible for. The Excel reporting form has calculations built in. The SurveyMonkey reporting form does not have calculations built in. And new this year, multiple choice questions have a pre-programmed drop-down list to choose from, which should make it easier for those facilities filling out the form. And this is the reporting form in SurveyMonkey. If you filled out the form before, you've seen this. It's the beginning of the reporting form and in SurveyMonkey. Okay, so this is a new, I don't want to say new section, but we have renamed this section this year. We're calling it Measuring Waste Generation, Recycling, and Composting. We've eliminated some of the categories in which you had to actually put tonnage in before, and that was in the non-office section. Unless all of your facilities are under OGS control and in the 3 R's program, please do not choose yes to question 3.1. If you are not in the 3 R's program, your agency is responsible for providing annual waste disposal and recycling tonnage data. The new section we've added this year is called Special Waste. This section has a lot of information in it, so please read it very carefully. Answer the questions to the best of your abilities. So you should have received an invitation from SurveyMonkey. The link was sent out on July 16th. Future reminder emails will also be sent from SurveyMonkey with this link, which I plan on doing next week, another reminder. I know that it's been a little bit over a month, but we'll get them out on a regular basis from this point on so that they don't get the link doesn't get buried in your emails. Once you've collected your facility data, use the link in the SurveyMonkey email to start completing the EO4 reporting form in SurveyMonkey. Let us know if you did not receive the link to begin the survey in SurveyMonkey or the link from the EO4 survey with all of the attachments. So in SurveyMonkey, you will know you have completed the survey once you get to this screen that says, thank you for taking the survey. The survey is basically at the end of section 11, you'll have to click save at the end, and then you'll see this screen. If for some reason you don't see this screen and you think that you've completed the SurveyMonkey, please call me and we'll figure out what might be the issue and get it solved. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Shireen, and I just want to put a plug in here for the amount of work that Shireen does to get that form put together every year. There's a lot of thought that goes into the questions and the type of data we're looking for, and it's really getting into the details, so she does a fantastic job with that. And next on our agenda for today, we have Heather Saunders from NYSERDA talking about a public authority.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how we tackle EO4 reporting at NYSERDA. We started doing this a few years ago when I was here when the EO first came about, and it felt really overwhelming to me. So I really want to make this very basic for the people who are just getting started, and for people that have been doing it for a while, I think it probably may be too basic, but hopefully you get something out of it. So just to introduce myself a little more, I am Sustainability Coordinator at NYSERDA, but it is a side hat like it is for most of you. NYSERDA is, we have about 340 full-time employees, 4 leased spaces that are not OGS managed, and we own one of our own facilities. We also have a small vehicle fleet of about 7 vehicles. Our facilities management is contracted out, and our purchasing, most of our purchasing for products and services is as well. We do have some in-house purchasing, but it's very small. So how we get started, what you should do first, Shireen mentioned the guidance for completing the EO4 reporting, the PDF that comes out, the spreadsheets. We break those spreadsheets up and we send them out as separate sections to the people that we need to get them to. So we should review the entire reporting document first and then identify who on your staff or external personnel, maybe vendors, can help answer each of those questions. And then again, separate the spreadsheets that come with the EO4 report. This allows you to easily circulate them to the appropriate staff and contractors. And then finally, we have a tracking document, which I'll show you a little bit later, that helps us to keep track of everything that we're doing, from who we're reaching out to their responses. So when possible, meet with the staff who make the purchases. May not always be possible for you, but I think this really works best. and go over the list of approved specifications on the Green New York website. I do have a slide coming up, the next slide, that shows the website and the list of specifications. But you should ask if any purchases were compliant with any of those green purchasing specifications within the fiscal year. Record that information in the green purchasing section of the survey in the appropriate category. And then I'm going to just skip to the next slide so you can get a visual. So you see that on the right-hand side, A through K lists out specific green purchasing specs, and there you'll report the amount spent in those areas when the purchase is compliant with the spec. But the other category, is where you'll actually put any of the specs that are not specifically captured above, put the dollar amount spent in that section. And you can see the other specifications on the left-hand side on the Green New York website. So next, we plan an email outreach campaign where we create a generic template for email, change the recipient's name, the questions, the section numbers for different staff and vendors. We include a due date that provides some buffer time for us to follow up, for us to compile the report, and to gather any internal approvals. It's always helpful to copy internal office support staff, if you know who that is, because those folks generally make their bosses respond. They sometimes lose track of things because they're very busy, but the office support staff can be that person who makes sure the request that you're sending keeps moving. Attach the appropriate spreadsheets. So again, we divide them up at the beginning. We send only the section that relates to the entity we're sending the information to. So we may just send someone green purchasing. We might send another vendor just waste. So direct those folks to where you need them to help. So section 2, question 3 through 6, and attach relevant specs. And then you really need to prepare to follow up. This definitely takes multiple follow-ups, so we give our reporters about 3 to 4 weeks to respond, and thanks to Shireen's good work, we have quite a bit of lead time in advance. So set calendar entries, or you can even tell your iPhone to remind you when it's time to make a follow-up. You can create the calendar entries that way, and we do about 1 2 weeks before, and then we do another one a couple of days before. This is the sample email. You can modify this however you want, but I wanted to show you an example of what we do at NYSERDA. So you can see here we attached several different specs. This went to our landscaping company, and we direct them to specific questions and sections. We also wanted to show you an example of our tracker. So we have the different entities that we do business with, the contact points, and you can see the specific questions on here that we're asking those folks. So if we need to refer back to this at any time, what questions did we ask them, what did they actually answer, this is a really good way to keep track of that information. And then tips for tracking year-to-year information. So we create subfolders, or we create folders, excuse me, to save all our EO4 related files by fiscal year. And it's really good to have the same naming structure so that you can find these very easily. And then we create subfolders, and it looks a little bit like this, except that the top one that you see here should have been the main folder and the other one's subfolder. So sorry about that. But you can see how we keep our information organized. And again, when I started this was one of the things that was really overwhelming for me. 2 years into the reporting process, I looked back and I thought, well, where is the information from the first reporting year? Where did I put this information from this vendor? And then DEC called and they said, hey, could you help us verify some data that was, in your previous report and compare it to this one? And I thought, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. So this really helps us to keep organized. So we save all of the email responses in a PDF form that we get from all of our vendors and from all of our staff. Important information and reporting instructions from DEC goes into another folder. The breakup of the individual reporting sections goes into another section, so we can easily just send those separate sections out to folks. And then our final submitted report every year goes in this particular folder. And then again, if we need to refer to it for any reason, we can go back to, fiscal year 17-18, our submitted report and see what the story was. And then we have our tracker that I showed you earlier. So tips for finalizing your report. You want to compile the data from different sources, make calculations where necessary, and place the final totals into one combined spreadsheet. Keep notes for yourself when combining a variety of figures into one cell. This is, an example would be for recycling. We have a variety of vendors that do recycling for us. We have confidential shredding, we have CFLs, we have batteries, and if I need to look back at some point and figure out how we got the final total, it's easy for me to do that if I've listed out batteries 5 pounds, CFLs 15 pounds. So I think that the best way to do that is to keep a separate cell next to that with all the specifics so that you have it. And then transfer the information into SurveyMonkey and submit it on or before the deadline. You want to include extra time for technical glitches because that's always a possibility. And then one final thing is to just really, like Beth said and Shireen said, we really want to just get better and better at this, and that is really the goal. So start early and you'll be completed before you know it. Thanks so much, everybody.
All right, thank you, Heather. And now we're going to move on to a large, complex entity that is the University at Albany. And we have Mary Ellen Malley here to speak to you about their reporting.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk about the University at Albany reporting structure and also discuss the SUNY as a whole system, how we report. So University at Albany, give you an idea of our size. We have about 4,000 full-time and part-time employees, 17,700 students, and approximately 7,700 of those live on campus. We own and operate the Uptown and Downtown campus. We actually don't own or operate the health science campuses, and we don't have the issue of leased buildings as much as other entities have. And a lot of our buildings that we don't own and operate are actually owned by another entity, the Research Foundation. So it gets a little complicated when you're figuring out what's your building that you're responsible for and what's not. But we track 35 buildings. We have about 100 vehicles in our fleet, and we have a shuttle system with 15 buses. So the challenge that we have at UAlbany is in the purchasing area, trying to track purchases, because a lot of our purchases are disaggregated and they're done at the office level. So I've found, like Heather said, when I've been here since the beginning, when EO4 first came out, and in the beginning it was a little overwhelming trying to track everything, but by the second and third year it was pretty, I wouldn't say easy, but easier. By then we had developed consistently people I could go to get the data. And I think that's a key as you move forward is I try to be consistent in how I report data and how I categorize data so that our baseline and moving forward is allowing us to show a change, although I'll fully admit the way I might interpret the data collection of an area might differ from one of my other SUNY colleagues. So I'll do credit to SUNY Central for trying to aggregate those and interpret those. But I think consistency is key, and making notes of where there's some discrepancies, trying to track down where it is. So waste has been easier for us, purchasing a little bit harder. So during the year, we actually have created some shared drives that collect our larger waste streams throughout the year. I work with our facilities department, and one of the advantages of being at a university, we have lots of students who can help with lots of things. So a student worker in my office goes and collects a lot of the manifest reports that we get from the recycling center or the landfill. We are a larger entity, so I think this is where, and it's an advantage, because we do have a lot of contracts around waste reduction, and we actually haul our own waste, where obviously if we're a smaller entity, we would not do that. So data hasn't been difficult with waste. There's always exceptions, and different vendors you use will be more or less responsive. But overall, we've been generally, most of the vendors have been very receptive to give us the data that we need. And this shared drive is updated throughout the year, which is great, because then I can just go to it when I need it. We also participate in EPA waste reduction programs, and they require reporting, but they require it for calendar year. And then we report to our national professional organization, and we use the university fiscal year, and they're all different. So one thing that I'll give all credit to my student assistant set this up in the shared folder to automatically calculate those for me. So I can click a tab, and one tab will have the calendar year, state fiscal year, university fiscal year. So I don't have to keep asking people over and over again for data if that data is entered into these folders. So that's been helpful. One thing we've tried to do over the last year, about last 2 years, is really begin to have more training sessions set up and discussions about waste diversion and specifically green purchasing. And really advertise the Green New York website, we think is awesome, and help bring awareness around the specs that are available and the contracts. And we've always brought in the idea of what's done with the data. I think people like that connection, you know, so it's not this, here she is again asking this data. We report out on, you know, we always share a copy of the report. And I also try to, in that email I send out, highlight where, if, and where. So lately it's been where, thankfully. Albany has been noted, so people can see how we play into the larger area. So we receive the PDF and the SurveyMonkey and the reporting form, and we use the Excel spreadsheet. I kind of send out a notice to my data collectors, and I ask them first just to tell me if they have any issue, sort of items of success or issues of concern. So I don't even ask them for the data right away. I just say, I've got the spreadsheet, I'm going to start filling it out based on our past information, and let me know if there's anything new or anything you're concerned. Then I'll email each contributor individually and tell them this is what I need, and I kind of refer to the tab and the items they need to look at it. So I give about 3 weeks. I think 3 weeks is usually the time frame that if I gave them 4, it would take them 4 weeks, and if I gave them 2, it would take them 2 weeks. But I think 3 weeks is my happy medium. And then I kind of remind them, please give me points of pride. I did steal that from you, SUNY Buffalo. Or issues of concern. And then we send this sheet off to SUNY Central, who aggregates it for the whole system. As I mentioned with waste, I feel like I've had an easier time in our particular position, given the way our wastes are handled. But purchasing has been harder. We do have some purchasing that is aggregated, such as green cleaning and our fleet and our PV. That's been very easy to get that data because perhaps only 1 or 2 people are buying it, or there's a centralized report. Paper, we use our centralized paper purchases from our rapid copy and what contracting and purchasing can pull together. But we know, we'll fully admit, we're not capturing all of the paper purchases because that would require us going through all of the P-card information and blocking out what was bought when. We would have to do the same thing with computers, although we're working to try to get an aggregated purchases that ITS is making, so we're still working on that connection. And things like furniture, carpeting, lighting, lots of those sometimes are embedded in projects, so that can make it sometimes difficult. So as I mentioned at the beginning, you know, trying to be consistent with what we report on and trying to constantly improve and not sort of letting the good be the victim of the perfect. Is that the phrase? I don't know if I got that phrase exactly right. But really making sure we continue to expand on what we're looking at. So then, when we finished at each individual campus, we send it to SUNY Central. And I believe SUNY requires the state-operated campuses to report, and there's 29 of us that are mandated to do that. And usually we get that to the Energy Office takes the lead at SUNY Central on that. And our due date is usually about a month prior, so, you know, they make sure we get it to them. And they aggregate it all into one report to SUNY and sent it in. So I think, you know, just to leave a couple of points here, you know, a lot of us have a disaggregated purchasing system, so that doesn't make it challenging on the purchasing side. Most of us don't have data that will separate the res halls from the campus offices. So technically we do have office and non-office waste and recycling, but we don't know the split. So we usually report it in one bucket or the other. And as I mentioned, I know many of my colleagues deal with lease spaces. I don't have to deal with that on a level that they do, but that I know a lot of people have expressed challenges with getting data from lease spaces as well as working with waste reduction at those. So I do want to acknowledge that's another concern within our system. I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And here on the last slide, you can see the contact information for our presenters today. If you do have questions about the process, feel free to reach out to them. And with that, we're going to get into the questions here. If you do have questions or things that came up during the webinar, feel free to type them into the chat box here. We're going to be taking them. And here's the first question we've got. Will the presentation be available after the college? We'll be putting the recording of it up on the Green New York website. We'll be sending a link around, and we also will put the slides up as well because we had a lot of good information on those. So other questions? We have the floor open now. Is there anything else that our presenters wanted to mention? Any other points?
I just think one of the things that comes up from time to time, not specific to my presentation, is where folks should report green purchases that are not related to the EO4 green purchasing specs. And I'll defer to Beth on this question and Shireen.
You mean ones that we don't have a spec for, Heather? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
I think you can still put it in the open-ended question for procurement. And actually, if you're buying, especially if you're buying a significant purchase that you believe is a green product, but we haven't covered it in a spec, we need to know that because we can develop a spec for it. And in fact, we would be really interested in having your help developing that spec, so you could send us what you believe are the criteria for a green product in that space, and then we can develop a spec from it. So that would be great.
And let me just add to that. If you really get to a section and you're like, I don't know where to put this information, I just don't know where it belongs, the narrative questions at the end are the best place for you to put extra information that you don't necessarily know where it belongs at the end of each section. And then at the end of section 11, there is an open-ended narrative question where you can put anything that you need to talk about right in there. So there's plenty of places. Don't be intimidated to put it in if you don't think it doesn't quite fit. We'll figure that out.
You know, and the more detail you can give us, I mean, a live body reads all those answers. Our different authors are assigned the different sections, and I get out my different colored highlighters and go through that, you know, with a fine-tooth comb. Shireen looks really carefully at the answers in section 11. So it really matters to us, and the more detail we have, the more jazz we can get about it, and then we'll reach out to, you know, to folks and ask them for images if we want that. And if you have images you like, please send them to us right up front, because that will also drive our attention towards it. I mean, I think it's really easy to get print, if you will, in the final report by making a little more effort to write up something that you're working on, something you're jazzed about, and send us an image of it, and I almost can guarantee it will go in there.
And another thing, just to build on that too, so I write the transportation section of the report each year, and what Shireen and Beth have said is incredibly accurate. It's that narrative that really kind of drives what we're doing. It's where that real innovation is, and there's a lot of things that you might think are just normal, what your agency does. You know, it's just, you know, everyday things. But if it's something that has a sustainability aspect of it, put it in there.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of stuff we don't think of specifically as sustainability that, you know, have a huge impact. So, and if you have questions about that, whether or not you want to put it in the narrative, feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to answer questions. And as Beth mentioned, the more pictures and images you have, even if you're not submitting them with the report, the better. One of the things we're going to be working on, and we'll be presenting this soon more at the Green New York Forum, is our SharePoint page. And we're going to be building up a photo library there of projects from various agencies, so that if somebody has a question or, you know, they need an image for something, we have a prime example of something that one of the agencies is doing, and that allows us to kind of elevate your work as well. So while you're going through the report, when you're writing the narrative, if you think of a project or you see something and you're like, you know what, that's something I really want to tout, ask those people that worked on it to get a picture, or go out and, you know, if you have the ability to go take a picture as well, do that. And we'll have a place on the SharePoint where you'll be able to upload those, you know, and hopefully that'll become like a point of bragging. You know, we did this great project, here's the image. And we can all kind of work together to lift the projects we're doing. We had one more question come in here. It is, for restricting the use of bottled water, does this include water coolers, both inline and bottles? And do you have suggestions for those with mobile or emergency fleets on water use?
Yeah, so it does include the water coolers that have a big blue bottle at the top. We are discouraging folks from purchasing those as well. There's still a huge transportation impact on those. They have to be driven to the sites and distributed. So the energy emissions and things like that from that are still an issue. So the Executive Order 18 does cover those blue bottle and, you know, anything that's using water that's coming in from outside your tap system. So we're really recommending, and a lot of agencies are doing it now. We just got one in our building, and I go downstairs and fill up every few hours. It's a nice break, you know, of bottle filling stations that have a built-in filter for the tap water at your facility. They're terrific. A lot of them will track for you how many bottles of water you're avoiding, like how much bottled water you're avoiding and the waste that's associated with that. So I think it's great, you know, because it's not just the bottles themselves, the plastic of the single-use bottles. It's the weight of the water when you're transporting it in a truck. And what was the second part of the question?
It was about inline, if they can use inline water coolers, so they would not have the bottle attached if they're inline, and so that's fine.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's really what the bottle stations do.
Yeah. That's our intention, to see more of those being used.
Yeah.
And the last part was suggestions for those with mobile or emergency fleets.
For water. For water? Yeah. So very interesting, because we've had a lot of really interesting reporting from agencies that have field operations like NYPA and the Division of Military Affairs. And I was really excited to see that we actually wrote it up in last year's report, I believe, for the Division of Military Affairs. What they did is they were stockpiling water. They were buying it ahead of time and stockpiling it, and they were realizing that some of that water would actually expire. They would have to throw it away. So they stopped doing that, and they started buying their water much closer to when they were going to deploy it for, you know, a field exercise or something like that. And for emergency fleets and things like that, I think you could do the same. You could be buying it on a rotating basis. Don't try to stockpile it. You know, you can absolutely use bottled water for those kinds of situations. You know, there's a lot of places like transporting inmates on a bus. They need to have water. They need to have bottled water. So we're not saying you can't use it. That's an exemption from EO18 that you just simply document with us. You tell us that's what you're doing, and that means that you are in compliance. And we have about, I'm sorry, I don't have it on the top of my head, but it's about 11 agencies that have exemptions that are completely normal and above board. Unfortunately, it's not just that your employees don't like drinking tap water. There has to be an actual issue with the tap water of potability or odor that is an issue before we can say that it's okay. And, I won't name a name of an agency, but one of the agencies up in the plaza, in the Empire State Plaza, OGS swapped out all of the drinking water fountains and put in new fountains and had bottled water filling stations, and their employees were still buying the bottled water, wanted them to buy bottled water for them. And when they reported that to us, I had to give them a call and say, you know what, that's not a valid exemption. Because you've got the source of potable water that's actually really good and cold and wonderful. And they immediately changed and dropped that. And the other requirement we have is that you say how much money you're spending on that water that you're buying, and that's been really very illustrative for agencies and authorities. Authorities are not required to comply with Executive Order 18. It's only executive agencies. So a number of SUNY campuses, for example, were reporting to us how much water they were spending on bottled water, how much money they were spending on bottled water, and when they did that, they would say, you know what, we're looking at this, we're spending $35,000 a year, we're going to stop doing that. We are going to move away from that. And one of my last pet issues with bottled water is meetings. People just feel like, one, they have to provide water to people at meetings, or they have to provide water to a person speaking at an event. I think, one, you can sort of second guess that. If someone really needs water, they can bring water. And we love using our reusable bottles and things like that. If not, you can contract with someone or have someone provide water in glasses in a pitcher. We do that every year for our annual meeting of the Interagency Committee. It takes a little more legwork at first to find the vendor who will do that for you, and is it cost. The cost could be more. I haven't actually analyzed those. But on the other hand, maybe you don't have to provide water every time you think you do. If you can tell people ahead of time, hey, bring your own water in a usable thing. We have a cooler down the hall. We have a way for you to get water at a bottle filling station. Think about it, because there's nothing worse than going online and looking for someone's board meeting and seeing a picture of their board meeting and every board member has a plastic water bottle. It's a bad image. It's not one we want to promote, and I think that it's a culture thing that we can all work on. So the last sort of recalcitrant use of bottled water is people just can't help themselves. They want to give people bottled water at these meetings, and I think we really have to think, well, is that necessary? Is that something we really have to do?
And I know one of the questions that most of you are thinking right now is, where will I get my small talk and witty banter if we get rid of the water? The water bottle filling stations work just as well. I've still had just as much witty banter filling a reusable water bottle as I have going to a water cooler. So do we have any more questions?
And I have something to talk about too.
And while we're waiting for some more questions to come in, do any of our panelists today have any other issues they'd like to raise or questions for the participants?
Yeah, hi, this is Beth. I wanted to raise the issue of lease space, because a lot of agencies year after year raise the concern or the challenge of being in lease space and also in multi-tenant space. And I'm going to address those each sort of separately. So lease space for a lot of agencies means not only do you contract with a landlord, but someone else is doing that on your behalf. And a lot of times it's the Office of General Services. So the Office of General Services both owns buildings that tenants are in, and they contract for the building management of that building. That's what happens here at 625 Broadway, where DEC is located. Or OGS can lease, take care of the lease for the agency, and they're a third party in between the tenant and the landlord. And so what we've come to understand over time is that just adding an extra layer of people in that process just adds an extra demand for good communication. So we're working really closely with the Office of General Services and the Real Property Management Facilities Division, and they're the ones that manage owned space, and the Real Property Services Division that manages lease space, to come up with a fact sheet, an actual process by which sustainability coordinators can be given guidelines for how to engage in a conversation with their OGS representative and their landlords or their building contractors on sustainability. I think that there is a bit of a need there to establish an ongoing, consistent, regular line of communication. What we've discovered about sustainability is a lot of times just lacking that connection, that ability to talk to someone, can mean all the difference on whether a project is successful or not. So we're working closely with OGS on that issue, and I'm very interested if you are in lease space and you have experienced a challenge, it would be fabulous to not only just say, hey, lease spaces are a challenge, but maybe explain in a little more detail in the written answer why it's a challenge. And again, we read those really carefully. Even if you don't have to write an essay, but if you write maybe a few sentences, more than one phrase, it would be really helpful to us to kind of understand what the challenge is. So that's the lease spaces and the relationship of the parties that are involved in that kind of space. The multi-tenant space is somewhat different. A lot of those are also in lease space, but I think there it's a big challenge for the waste measurement, because if your hauler is taking the waste from that building, then it's more difficult for them to give you data about your floor or your portion of the floor even. And in that situation, it might be best for you to do an annual or biannual waste audit so you understand the general gist of what kind of waste you're generating. And if you implement a waste reduction program, it's good to then do an audit first and then implement that program and give yourself some time and then do another waste audit. And that's what we did in the Region 3 office when we implemented hand dryers versus paper towels. And they were able to show that a quarter of the waste was reduced when they moved to hand dryers. So waste audit is really powerful. Our Division of Materials Management staff will help train people on waste audit. We do it twice a year, once a year here in our building, and we invite people to participate in that if they want to see how it's done. Anything you want to add to that at all, Gary? I'm looking at our Division of Materials Management person now. So.
Well, I would say in addition to the quantitative part of the waste audit, the qualitative part is also quite important. So for instance, a little story for you, we were doing a waste audit here and we were looking at the fact that when we got to our cafeteria that services mostly employees but also the public, we found that one year all of their recyclables or large cans and bottles, etc., were in a bag, all cleaned and rinsed, but in the garbage. So there was a disconnect between the kitchen staff and the maintenance staff. And so they just took that bag every day and put it in the garbage. And once we saw that, it was very easy to get a separate container marked as recyclables, and now we're saving, at the end of the year, tons of recyclables. So same thing with copy paper and your garbage. As you do a walkthrough, you might find that there's 1 or 2 garbage cans that are receiving contamination. Either a garbage can is receiving good used copy paper for whatever reason, or the reverse, where paper collection container is receiving garbage. And so that's very easy to fix with signage or moving the bins around to better locations.
And just to add to what Gary said, also, I mean, in doing a waste audit, one year we were able to see that there was a huge amount of, the coffee containers that you throw away in the garbage instead of, people using reusable. So we did our educational piece on that year in saying that, don't forget your reusable coffee mug instead of getting one every time you go to the store.
And I'd add to that we got the cafeteria to put up a sign saying, hey, you get a discount if you bring your mug, your reusable mug.
That's great.
Yeah, and that's worked out really well. Do we have any final questions here? We'll leave the chat box open here for another minute or so. Couple quick housekeeping things before we go. We do have the Green New York Forum coming up. It's going to be on Wednesday, October 17th in the Empire State Plaza. It's an all-day networking and collaboration conference for sustainability coordinators and your teams. So if there's anybody at your agency that you think would benefit from coming and learning more about sustainability initiatives and what you can do at your agency, feel free to invite them. When we send out the link for the recording of the webinar and the slides, we'll also include the registration form for that. There is no cost for it. And as I mentioned, it is here in Albany. We're going to have some good things to be rolling out there as well. The other thing I mentioned before was our SharePoint site. If you don't have access to that, let me know. We can get you access to it. We've put up a discussion board there where we have people posting success stories, how-tos. You can post a question there to all the coordinators and have them try and help you. And as I mentioned, we're going to be adding kind of a photo bragging section where you can upload photos of your sustainability initiatives. And we see that as being a really powerful tool to allow coordinators to network and learn more from others. And if there's any kind of content that you can think of or projects or things that would help you make your entity more sustainable, let us know. Our goal recently has been to work on things that we can push out to you that are kind of pre-packaged. So things like how we've worked on getting CDTA bus passes for local travel for agencies, or having employees go paperless for their pay stubs if you're in the payroll online controller's office. Anything where we can put together some sort of an action toolkit where we have sample all staff emails, how to talk to management about it and present it, kind of the potential savings, flyers, things like that. We're going to try and make more of that stuff and get it out to you. And if you're thinking about something where, I'd like to tackle this, but I don't have time, bring it to us. We'll see what we can do. And if you're thinking about it, someone else is as well, I'm sure, because we all face a lot of the same challenges. So I haven't seen any more questions come in. Panelists, any final thoughts today?
My only final thought is October 19th.
All right, and with that, we'll end today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining today. This is the most people I've seen on one of our webinars in a long time, so it's great to have you here. As Shireen said, October 19th is the deadline. October 17th is the Green New York Forum, and we've got some great stuff going on, so let's keep the momentum going. Thanks a lot, everyone.